It all began with a soft whimper in the dark, so quiet, it could have been the wind. But 8-year-old Ellie heard it. She always heard what others missed. She ran barefoot across the cold wooden floor of her family's farmhouse, tiptoeing so her parents wouldn't wake up. Something was calling her, something hiding in the barn. What she found there that night would change her life, and her entire town, forever. Two frightened, dirt-covered creatures shivering in the hay. At first, Ellie thought they were abandoned dogs. But she had no idea just how wrong she was. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She reached out, and hugged them. And that one moment, that single act of kindness, it would uncover a truth so unbelievable, even grown-ups refused to believe it at first. Stay with me, because what these animals really were, will leave you speechless. Ellie was a farm girl through and through. She didn't have tablets or video games. Her world was made of sunrises, muddy boots, and the smell of fresh hay. Every morning, she'd help her parents feed the chickens, gather eggs, and carry a bucket nearly as big as her little frame across the field to water the goats. At just 8 years old, she had the heart of someone far beyond her age, gentle, curious, and always drawn to anything lost, lonely, or broken. Her parents often joked that if Ellie ever found a dragon in the woods, she'd probably ask it if it needed a blanket and a snack. But no one could have guessed that something far stranger than a dragon would show up on their land, and only Ellie would be the one brave enough to care. The farm had always felt like the safest place on earth. But sometimes, even the safest places hold secrets waiting to be found. She didn't know where they came from, or why they chose her barn. But one thing was clear, these animals were afraid of something, and Ellie was about to find out what. From that night on, Ellie had a secret. Every morning before sunrise, and every evening after dinner, she would sneak into the barn with leftovers tucked into her sweater, pieces of chicken, a little rice, warm biscuits. The creatures, because by now, it was clear they weren't just dogs, began to trust her. Their eyes, once full of fear, softened. Their tails, once tucked tightly under, started to wag just a little when they saw her. She named them. The bigger one was a Shadow, because he never let the smaller one out of his sight. And the smaller one? She called her Whistle, because she made the tiniest, sweetest sounds when Ellie petted her. They played together in the barn when no one was watching. Ellie would laugh as they rolled in the hay, chasing a string tied to a stick she found. They were like children, starved not just for food, but for love. And love is something Ellie had in abundance. But even though they were growing stronger, there was something about their eyes. Something that said they were hiding more than just fear, something deeper. One morning, just as Ellie arrived with a warm biscuit in hand, she noticed fresh footprints, and they weren't hers. Someone else had been in the barn. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Ellie froze. Right outside the barn door, pressed into the mud, were boot prints. Deep ones. Not her dad's, they were too narrow. And not her mom's, too heavy. Someone else had been here. Her heart pounded as she peeked into the barn. Shadow and Whistle were still there, but they weren't playing. They were huddled close, ears perked, eyes darting. Ellie ran to them, whispering, "Did someone try to hurt you?" She didn't expect an answer, but the way Shadow placed his body between her and the door, it told her everything. Something, or someone, was looking for them. And not in a good way. Later that night, while her parents watched TV, Ellie pulled out her mom's old laptop and started searching. She typed, "Animals that look like dogs but aren't." She clicked through pages and pictures until she saw it. A photo that made her breath catch in her throat. Shadow and Whistle weren't dogs. They were wolf pups. Suddenly, everything made sense, and nothing did. Why would wolf pups show up on her farm? And more importantly, who was trying to take them back? The next day, everything felt off. Ellie couldn't focus during chores. Her eyes kept drifting to the tree line beyond the barn. Her ears caught every crunch of leaves, every gust of wind. That's when she saw him. A tall man in a dark coat, standing just beyond the fence. He didn't wave. He didn't move. He just watched. Ellie's stomach turned. She ducked behind the coop, heart racing. When she peeked again, he was gone. That night, she sprinted to the barn earlier than usual. Shadow and Whistle were already on edge, pacing, sniffing, growling low. Someone had been near. She held them close, whispering, "I won't let anyone take you." And in that moment, they didn't feel like wild animals. They felt like family. She knew she had to tell someone. But who would believe her? Who would help her protect two wild wolves when most people would see them as a threat? And then she remembered someone who might. A neighbor her parents rarely spoke about. A retired wildlife officer who once saved a mountain lion. If anyone would understand, it was him. The next morning, Ellie biked farther than she ever had alone. Down the gravel road, through the narrow path behind the cornfields, to the house with the green tin roof. Mr. Harlan. Her parents always said he was strange, but kind. And most importantly, he understood animals in a way most people never could. Ellie knocked, her hands shaking. When the door opened, the old man peered down at her, wrinkled face, silver beard, and eyes that looked like he'd seen everything. "I need help," Ellie whispered. "It's about two, not dogs." Harlan didn't laugh. He didn't scold. He just nodded and said, "Show me." When they arrived at the barn, the moment was tense. Shadow growled. Whistle hid behind a hay bale. But Harlan didn't flinch. He knelt, slow and steady, whispering something only the animals could hear. Minutes passed, and then, to Ellie's shock, Shadow stepped forward. Not to attack, but to sniff. To listen. To trust. After a long silence, Harlan turned to Ellie and said, "These aren't just wolf pups. They're imprinted. They trust you like a mother. That's rare. And dangerous. Because others won't be so kind." Ellie's heart sank. If they were discovered, the government might take them. Or worse. But what Harlan said next changed everything. "We need to find out where they came from, before someone else does." Later that day, Ellie and Harlan sat at his kitchen table, a steaming mug of cocoa in her hands, old wildlife reports and folders spread before them. Harlan showed her something that made her eyes widen, a report about an illegal breeding ring discovered 2 towns over, a place where wolves were being kept, trained, and sold like attack dogs. Most of the animals were rescued, but 2 pups went missing during the raid. A male and a female. Shadow and Whistle. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. She couldn't imagine these gentle, scared creatures being raised for violence. Harlan nodded slowly. They must have escaped, or were dumped when they were no longer useful. They're lucky they found you. Ellie looked out the window, heart pounding. Then who was the man watching from the trees? What if he's trying to get them back? Harlan's eyes darkened. Then we don't have much time. We need to make them legally protected. Safe. But doing that meant going public, telling the authorities, risking everything. And Ellie had to decide, could she let the world in, and still protect the 2 lives she now loved like her own? Ellie barely slept that night. She kept going over the risks in her mind. If she told the authorities, they might take the pups away. If she stayed silent, the man in the woods might come back, and succeed. But then she remembered Shadow's eyes. The way he looked at her like she was his whole world. The way Whistle whimpered softly when Ellie left the barn. These animals weren't just survivors. They were hers. And she was theirs. So the next morning, with her parents beside her and Harlan by her side, Ellie walked into the county wildlife office. The officer raised an eyebrow. "You're here to report wolves?" Ellie took a deep breath. Yes. But they're not wild anymore. They were abandoned. And I want to help them. The room fell silent. Then Harlan stepped in, showing papers, photos, and explaining everything he'd uncovered. The illegal operation. The missing pups. The man in the woods. The officer leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. You're saying these animals imprinted on this girl? And she's kept them safe? Ellie nodded, her voice quiet but firm. They saved me as much as I saved them. What happened next, no one expected. Instead of taking them away, the authorities made a stunning decision, one that would forever change Ellie's life, and the fate of Shadow and Whistle. The next week brought news Ellie would never forget. After reviewing the reports and seeing how bonded the wolves were with Ellie, the authorities made a rare and extraordinary decision: Shadow and Whistle would not be taken away. Instead, they would be registered as part of a protected rehabilitation program, with Ellie and Mr. Harlan as their official caretakers. Ellie's eyes welled up with tears. She didn't care about titles or praise. She only cared that her friends were safe, finally, truly safe. The mysterious man was later found and arrested, connected directly to the illegal breeding ring. He'd been searching for the missing pups, but it was too late. They had a new home now. One filled with trust, warmth, and unconditional love. Months passed. The barn was now their haven, not just a hiding place. Ellie helped Harlan build a secure outdoor enclosure so Shadow and Whistle could roam freely while being safe from harm. Sometimes, she would sit with them under the stars, feeling their warm fur against her sides. "You're not lost anymore," she'd whisper. "You're home." Word spread through the community, and instead of fear or judgment, there was awe. Respect. Ellie had done something few adults could: she saw the hearts behind the fangs. The love behind the growls. This story isn't just about two wild animals and a brave little girl. It's about compassion. About looking past fear to find connection. It's about the power of choosing kindness, even when the world expects you to walk away. Because sometimes, the ones we're meant to protect, are the ones who end up saving us.